Hello everybody and welcome to day 3 of the Egeria Metadata show. It's our last day today. We've had a couple of really exciting days so far, hearing from lots of the different maintainers and contributors. And at the end of the series of 3 videos, we'll be sending out some links and some more information. So if you want to go and revisit and re-watch some of the shows, then you'll be able to do that on YouTube. And if you missed anything, of course, you can catch up there again with it. So today, I think we've got a slide in a second. John, can you sort of advance the slide? Thank you. Of what we're going to be covering today. So today is all about lightning talks and looking at different areas that we're focusing on with Egeria and places we're thinking of going with Egeria. And also a bit about sort of adoption. So we're going to kick off in a moment with Mandy Chesil, who you've heard before already, talking about supporting ethical AI. Then we're going to have a look at industry models and business glossaries, very important and relevant to metadata. And then we're going to have a look at how IBM are adopting Egeria a little bit and the Cloud Paks and the importance of metadata for us at IBM. And then a really exciting topic, as Egeria and metadata, of course, goes further than just sort of the data lake, data warehouses that you may sort of associate metadata with, but looking at how Egeria can help drive enterprise APIs. But before we start, John, if we can move forward again, we've got one little exciting announcement. It's been quite popular as our Egeria webinar series, and we've had lots of emails and lots of follow-up after the various shows that we've been running. So we've decided we're going to try and run a monthly webinar where we'll be covering different topics. The next one we're hoping to run on the 23rd of April. So if you want to mark that in your diaries, that's when we're planning our next one. We're about to announce the agenda for that. It'll just be a 1-hour session and we'll be doing a deep dive into a specific topic. The one after that, we're hoping that that will be focused on showing you how to get up and running. So we may even have a hands-on lab if we can set up the technology to be able to deliver that properly. And that will be in May. So today, as ever, if you have any questions while the speakers are presenting, put them into the Q&A window. And if you take your cursor to the bottom of the screen, you should have a little bar that pops up and you'll see Q&A. You can type in there and we'll give you a short answer while the presenter's talking. And when we've finished each 15-minute presentation, we'll have a little bit of Q&A. So we'll repeat those questions back to the presenter. And again, if you want to ask questions, you can also do that in the chat window, which will be open as well. Okay, so with all that information, I'm now going to hand over to Mandy. So Mandy will start sharing her screen in a second. And we'll have a look at building trusted AI.
Hello everybody, is the PowerPoint sharing step 1.
Did you want to maximize that? So that's perfect.
Okie doke. All right then, so building trusted AI. I think we should start with what does trust mean? And when we think about the services that we trust, there's probably 3 factors to it. Is it reliable? Whenever I go to the service, is it there? Do I trust that any data I give them is actually being properly looked after and they're not losing my intellectual property or my privacy for a start? And finally, are they very clear on how they're building, how they're using my data, how they're processing it, how the results are being used? So we're talking about really reliability, protection, and transparency. So let's look at an example. So here's Alice, she's an ice cream seller. And she thinks, well, she's never sure how much ice cream to have with her on a day. So she thinks, well, could AI help her in her business? I've called this a digital service. So this is something that she looks up online, and sitting behind it is an AI model. But if she did buy this service, how would she know that it's actually giving her accurate results? And how much of the operation does she actually need to understand? Because say it tells her to buy so much ice cream to take out for a particular day. If the results are inaccurate, then she's going to lose money on her business. So what are the things that could cause her her service to not work properly? So it's very simple. Basically, the data that it's using is wrong. So for example, if this was working out how much ice cream people were eating depending on the weather, and the weather forecast was not accurate, then it's probably going to tell you to buy the wrong amount of ice cream for a particular day. Another example is that the digital service is being used, is being trained on one set of data and is being used for a completely different purpose. So for example, if the model was trained on buying patterns from Italy and was being deployed into the UK, and people in the UK bought ice cream on a different basis than they did in Italy, then obviously the results would be wrong. So this is input data, then the actual deployment not matching the training data, or the model is just too simplistic. So for example, if it only worked on the weather, but actually humidity or whether there's a school holiday was just as important in terms of how much ice cream people ate, then again, the model would give you the wrong answer. So as somebody who's buying an AI service and you know, sort of how much can they trust it, they actually need to know an awful lot about how that service was built in order to be sure that they can trust the results that come from it. And it's not just how it's built, it's how it's been deployed and it's being fed, and it's learning if it's learning, and also how will it be maintained into the future. So it might give an accurate result this week, but what about 6 months? What about a year's time? So again, that you can start to see that Alice needs an awful lot of information before she can make a good choice about the AI she's buying. If you're a company that's actually selling AI services, excuse me, then you need to start to think about different risks, because from Alice's point of view, the amount of ice cream she has to buy for her business is important to her, but no one is going to die or have their life destroyed if there's a problem with that particular AI. Excuse me. But of course, there are proposals to use AI for things that affect people's health, transport, so the safety aspects. And when you look at these different aspects, you can start to see how changes in the way that the AI is written and used has a marked impact on the level of risk and the level of safety and trust that's required around that particular piece of AI. So for example, if someone is making a real-time decision that affects which track the train goes down, as opposed to someone who's getting information like Alice about how much ice cream to buy, the level of risk of those two things being wrong is far, far different between those two cases. So this sort of assessment of the risk is going to have a big impact on how much investment the company makes in terms of supporting the three aspects of trust for the end users and for the deployment of the service. So when we look at trust, it's not something that you can sort of bolt on at the end, sort of a tick, make it trusted. It's something that has to be thought through at every single stage of the development of the digital service, from the initial planning, what data we're going to use, how we're going to validate it, etc., through to the way the service is developed, its deployment and the environment that supports its deployment, as well as the way people are onboarded and the expectations that are set, and it's used going forward, and then also how things are handled if something happens, such as a data breach or a system outage, loss of the internet, etc. What is the impact of that? So, as I say, trust really needs to be built into every level, and this picture here shows the different types of things that people could be doing during that development to start to ensure that they're embedding trust into the service at every single stage. So there's a lot of focus here on personal data and privacy, but also there's the safety and the testing and the ongoing validation of how the how the service is developed. And because this is an Egeria presentation, one of the key functions of this entire life cycle is the fact that there's a metadata service sitting right in the middle that's capturing information and linking it from all these different processes so that it's possible at all key stages in the use of the service, whether it's a point at which someone's buying or choosing the service through to different aspects of its operation. The right information is there and available to the decision makers as they go through the process. So that's it, lightning talk. Any questions? Are we doing questions in between, or are we doing questions at the end?
We're going to do questions in between. We haven't had any questions yet.
Okay, maybe go on to somebody else then, and then see what comes up.
We may get some more questions, or we'll think of some questions ourselves to ask you.
Okay, I'll stop sharing, and then somebody else can come.
I've got one from Brendan, who's presenting in a moment. And what are you saying, Brendan? How do we unwind metadata states in the case of GDPR?
I don't understand the question. So GDPR requires all of those process pieces. So what does unwind metadata state mean? Sorry.
Brendan, you have to come off mute. We'll let you ask the question.
Yeah.
So basically, if you use a piece of AI to create or learn a piece of data, it creates metadata from the repository, as you were indicating. When there's a successful GDPR request to remove data about an individual and all the metadata associated with them, it's an interesting subject about how you unwind the knowledge that the AI has learnt within the AI algorithm, but also then how you unwind it within the metadata catalog that exists in the center. So, typically people think of GDPR as removing data from databases, but it's gradually becoming far more complex than that.
Which was complex enough, yes. So one of the reasons why we have such strong provenance in Egeria is to allow us to know exactly where things have come from. So we know what processes and the original source of that information comes from. Then the other thing that's interesting is that you're not required to delete data that's part of a regulation as well. So it's not automatically deleting all data. Yeah, I think certainly that's part of the discussion and design for the AI.
Okay, so as we swap over to Pat, who's going to talk about industry models and business glossaries, which we mentioned the other day, as we talked about SIM, which is an open source model. And we also mentioned the industry models or business glossaries that we have from IBM. So we're going to go and delve into them. Just before Pat starts, in the chat window, one thing I didn't mention was we've actually got 3 topics there listed: developing a glossary and description of a subject area. The second one, building a data catalog, and the third one about defining a governance program. These are some of the things we're thinking of possibly covering in our next webinar that we run. So what we're going to do is, over the course of this webinar today, we'll pop up at some point a survey so you can vote on which of those topics is of most interest to you, and we might base that to help us choose what we're going to focus on for our next webinar. So with no further ado, I'll hand over to Pat. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Pat, and then we'll let you go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Moya. You guys can hear me and see my slides? Yep, okay, good. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pat O'Sullivan. I'm part of the IBM Industry Models team, and we're part of the IBM Data Ops organization, formerly part of IBM worrying about data governance. So I guess a lot of the work I'll be talking about today is actually work that we have underway at the moment in terms of active development. So I'm obliged to put up the standard IBM disclaimer in case I talk about something that we don't actually announce, but we're actually intending to deliver on this stuff. So basically, I guess where we're coming from is we have a set of industry models that cover 4 industries. As you can see, they're banking, insurance, healthcare, and E&U. And predominantly, I guess, banking and insurance have been our home turf for over 20 years. I guess most of our business traditionally would have been in the data warehouse area, recently emerging into the data lake area. And I guess because of the change in the landscape, we're finding now that whereas 5 years ago, all of our focus was on the ER data models to design a data warehouse or a dimensional data mart or whatever, we're seeing an increased interest from our clients in terms of higher level vocabulary models or semantic models to underpin data governance. So the area in red on the right hand side there is has been a particular focus for us of a development activity we've had underway now for quite a number of months to basically renovate, modernize, upgrade our vocabulary content to try and bring it on to the next generation. And that's what I'm going to predominantly talk about today. One of the reasons we were going down this road at all was from talking to a number of clients. They're faced with a whole bunch of challenges. I'm not going to go through everything on the slide here, but in general, it's either organizations have a challenge in terms of they're under pressure to do things much more quickly. The old systems that they have today, where we would have, for example, provided multiple data models, vocabulary models, the labor-intensive nature of upgrading and maintaining those meant that they're unable to adapt and react to changes either in the technical landscape or the business landscape. And that's just within the sort of their traditional analytics perspective. And certainly also a lot of them are coming under pressure to not just focus on the traditional data management systems of insight, but actually also look at how they put in place semantic layers, business languages that would cover not just the analytics world, but also would cover the more traditional operational or systems of records of worlds as well. So those are kind of the base, the range of challenges. And also, I guess we were being asked to look at a whole set of new use cases, new personas. So now we have data scientists, we have citizen analysts. We also have AI and machine learning applications that need to run against this vocabulary as well. So putting all that together, we came up with the following 4 kind of focus areas that would be kind of our stakes in the ground that would kind of guide us as we upgrade our content. Starting kind of left, I'll very quickly go through them left to right. So first, the left-hand side, data governance, that's kind of the table stakes. At the end of the day, if we're putting vocabulary content out for folks to reuse, it's got to be business friendly, it's got to be intuitive to business users and data scientists. So that's kind of the basic objective, that we can support self-service. A very important part of our business, certainly in our more regulated industries, is a lot of our content tends to be regulatory oriented. So certainly the ability for our content to continue to serve that regulatory need it will always be a kind of a major development focus for us, and that remains to be the case. One of the things that we're starting now with a view to predominantly working on in the second half of the year is how we get to actually enable the vocabulary or the glossary to be not just part of the self-service data governance world, but also to play an active role in sort of data ops deployment. And then finally, probably a longer term view, but once again, something that's coming up from a lot of our clients is, how do I take the vocabulary and make it in such a way that it also has a role to play when I want to have natural language queries that certain users want to run against my technical infrastructure. So those are kind of the main 4 areas that we were kind of look at in terms of development. From an architecture point of view, I guess what we were trying to do was figure out how we push everything into one central knowledge base sitting within a catalog, and with the many facets of different types of knowledge within that. So core business knowledge, sort of the canonical central knowledge across the enterprise, knowledge about the users, their behaviors, their preferences, and so on. Implementation knowledge is around that of the what have I implemented, what data assets do I have in my data lake, and then what we call supportive knowledge or external knowledge. What are the types of, let's say, external, mention of GDPR earlier, what sort of GDPR taxonomies and other regulations do we need to have that are within the domain of interest that need to be managed as well? So how do we pull all that together? How do we do so in a way that the onboarding of that different business and technical metadata can be supported not just in a manual way, but in an automated way. And how does a data steward, how do we make sure that a data steward is being presented with a reasonable set of tools to support that? And then finally, how do we support the different business users, whether they're coming in directly using the catalog itself, or whether they're perhaps implicitly using it via a chatbot. And then finally, as I said earlier, a key thing for us is, and this comes to us from a number of, let's say, our kind of forward-looking clients, is it's not just good enough to be about analytics. The logic goes, if we're going to invest in building and maintaining and extending this language, this business language, the more we can make it extensible across all aspects of our environment, the better we can justify the effort that we're going to invest in maintaining this. So that's kind of the angle there. So it's not just for my data warehouse, data lake. How can we also help it in terms of things like digital transformation? And I'll quickly touch upon that as we get through the deck. So in terms of the piece of work that we're doing today, so I'll talk about two pieces of work that we're doing. First is what we're doing at the moment is we are taking all the business knowledge that traditionally would have been spread across our existing glossaries that we have today, but also we would have dotted around our various different data models that would sit in different tools. We would have that business knowledge spread across those different tools. So basically, to use all of the business knowledge that we would have had traditionally, you kind of needed to have knowledge on 2 or maybe even 3 different tools. What we're basically doing is taking all of the constraints, the cardinalities, the relationships, the structures, anything to do with the representation of business knowledge, and rendering that in one single repository. And that's kind of the main piece of work we're doing at the moment, is making sure that we're hoovering up all of the business content moving across. Another thing that we're doing is also looking at how do we now have a chance to maybe do some serious modernization. So we're looking at a number of inputs, one of which was the work that Mandy and the team are doing in terms of the Egeria Metadata, looking at traditional ontologies in terms of how they approach this, and figuring out how do we come up with a single set of structures, irrespective of the industry, because we've a heritage of different industry models came from different organizations. How do we have one single standardized set of structures that work irrespective of industry, but also how do we make sure that those structures aren't just going to address the use cases we know we need today, but also are future-proofed in terms of where we want to start using them in terms of, for example, extraction out into things like OWL RDF for use from ontology-based activities. So that's kind of the work that's going on at the moment. That should come to an end sometime sort of mid-late summer as we finalize that kind of core content. And that's kind of the foundation of the work that we're doing. And in terms of the work, the focus around that has been specifically looking at how do we break down all of the content that we have and basically define them into a set of fairly simple to remember patterns of our constructs or structures. So looking at how we break up the terms, any additional structures that we put in place, and certain additional features of the IBM tool, the Watson Knowledge Catalog. And the idea basically is that we're going to define a very specific meta model that sits on top of our catalog tools, and some of the content that we provide to clients is quite large, tens of thousands of terms in some cases. So the idea is, if all of this content conforms to a very specific set of well-enforced patterns and structures, then the idea is learn the patterns and structures, of which there is a finite number, then you have a good chance of understanding the broad range of business content. So that's kind of the approach that we're doing. And what we're also providing is a set of services that would be able to help you enforce conformance with that particular structure. So sets of rules that we can, if clients are interested in that, we can make that available as well. And that becomes important in a couple of seconds as I'll explain. But basically the idea is to come up with a very specific, explicit structure. And as I said, that was informed by both looking at existing ontologies, but also looking at what's going on in terms of the Egeria standard. And then just a very quick example of some of the many kind of designs we're putting together in terms of how that would look in terms of, so we're going into things like concept terms and terms that have to do with the types of things that an organization is interested in measuring or tracking, the properties that are associated with that term in blue, the reference data that's associated with that. And we also looked at how we incorporate measures, how we incorporate relationships and so on. So there's quite a lot of talk gone into the various different core concepts and structures and properties associated with that. And then in terms of the next step, so what we're now just starting to do some prototyping on is once we've got that particular business knowledge in place, what that does is that's a great basis for the traditional day-to-day data governance, supporting self-service BI, stuff like that. That's exactly kind of what we want to achieve, as I said, as a baseline. But actually what we wanted to do also is say, well, how can we actually stretch that? And if we start adding things on, can we start reusing that business knowledge that you have to gather anyway for your data governance perspective? Can we start using that for other means? And specifically what we're now looking at doing is how we plug into that a set of design deployment knowledge. So typically the knowledge that the non-business knowledge that was buried in our data models, really around the sort of the logical physical transformations for our dimensional models, for our atomic models and so on. And how do we actually make available a set of generators so that basically a client can start with the business knowledge that underpins their data governance, but then uses that to actually generate a range of different artifacts. We know clients don't just do data governance, they're also interested in continuing to do the traditional data warehouse database design. They're interested in data mart structures. A lot of our clients are also interested in not just the data side of things, but also would like to use that business knowledge to form the basis for standardization of their API development, of their RESTful API. So being able to generate that in terms of open API, JSON and Swagger is very important to us. And then also making it available in RDF or JSON and LEAF format. So it can also be exported out for use to tools like Protege for the type of ontology modeling, but also we want to make sure that we can potentially use that for use with Egeria as well. So that's kind of the piece of work that we're looking to do in the sort of second half of the year and probably into early next year, in terms of really trying to take the business knowledge that you've gathered for data governance and how do we transform that in a way that can also be leveraged for other more active and generation of artifact purposes. So that's kind of the core second area of development focus. Underpinning all of that, and I'm not going to go through all of the individual topics here. In fact, we have a document underpinning this. If folks are interested, happy to share this meta model structure. This is what our validators will enforce on top of the business term. So it's kind of a layer on top of what you would have with Egeria or what you would have out of the box with a catalog, so that if we can enforce this type of meta model structure, we know then we've got a solid basis for those types of generators. This is sort of the current draft of an evolving meta model we have in terms of around how we would see the core terms around concepts, properties, relationships, measures, and so on. How we want to hang these together, and how do we, and also I guess one of the reasons we were coming up with this is we're getting a lot of requests from clients for guidance on how do you create a catalog, how do you create a vocabulary. Most clients have had decades of knowledge on how to create a data model, an ER model for data warehousing. The whole area of putting together a sensible business glossary is something new for a lot of clients. So that's why we're trying to document our thinking in terms of, here's a suggestion, you don't have to follow this, but here's a suggestion on how you construct and set these things up so that you get the maximum benefit from them. And then in terms of the other piece of work we're doing as well as and that's kind of shaping it, is looking at that if on the left hand side here is the meta model that we've just been defining in terms of the objects, properties, and relationships. And this is an ongoing piece of work with David Radley on Mandy's team and Mikkel Miklas on our team here, where we're trying to, as we evolve this, how does that meta model map not just to Egeria, as you can hear on the right hand side, but also looking at how it maps to things like RDF and OWL. And just to make sure that we come up with it, and what that is doing for us here is making sure that it's keeping us honest in terms of any definitions we have here as we build out our content, that we're future-proofing it, that it's kosher from an Egeria point of view, but also that it's representable at a basic level in an RDF and an OWL. We're not talking about full ontologies, but at least we want to make sure that what we can extract out it makes sense as a baseline, less expressive ontology. And then finally, in terms of areas that we're looking at, as I said, we're looking at support for natural language queries is certainly something we want to look at in the future. For sure, I think the role of how we extend the use of what we do in the catalog today in terms of ontologies and graph, I think that's something that we're definitely we're looking at. We are ongoing looking at how we make sure we continue to support self-service BI and areas like that. And we are being pushed by our clients rightly to make sure that we introduce levels of automation where we can in terms of managing, curating our models. Of course, as well as that, the area for an important area from us from an IBM point of view is making sure we support multi-cloud deployment. And last but certainly not least, making sure that whatever we do is aligned with the Egeria standard going forward. And as I said, Mandy and her team have been really helpful in terms of keeping us honest in terms of as we evolve the models. So that's kind of I think 15 minutes and 46 seconds. I've run over slightly, but that's kind of what I wanted to say today. Hopefully that was of help to you guys.
Thank you, Pat. That was really good. It was a great insight, and I've got to say that the industry models are very popular, and having a good glossary is a very important thing to sort of help with governance. I mean, we talked earlier in the week about open source glossaries, such as the SIM model, which of course is a sort of cut down one, and the IBM ones are sort of very comprehensive. So yeah, it's a good one. We haven't had any questions. I don't know if anyone has a question they want to sort of add to the chat or the Q&A at the moment. But I think one of the things I think for our team was we were very keen to work with the industry models team as they bring a ready-made glossary that's sort of available. It's quite a comprehensive, quite a complicated and long drawn out thing to actually start creating a glossary from scratch. To have a pre-built one that's sort of possibly industry specific is a very powerful thing to have sort of and be up and running with. So we sort of got involved so we could import those models. But of course, once they're in the Egeria framework, as Egeria can share metadata between many repositories, it means other elements or capabilities, applications within the technology estate can actually make use of that glossary as well very easily and consume the glossary.
And just to say, to add to that, Moya, that the timing was great in that because we had the thing up on blocks anyway for the last 6-9 months, being able to kind of have you guys influence what we're doing and keeping us honest at the same time, it was the perfect opportunity. 2 years later or 2 years ago, we couldn't have done that. So the timing worked out quite well as well.
Yeah, and it just means that where we've got organizations that we work with as IBM, you know, not everybody uses all the IBM tooling, but the industry models is very much an asset. So it enables them to sort of, you know, go with whatever tooling organizations we're working with are using. If anyone gets any more questions, we'll have questions at the end as well. But Pat, thank you very much. That was really good, very enlightening. And now we're going to move on to Brendan, who can introduce himself in a moment, to look at sort of industry models. So yeah, there's a lot of talk about how IBM and other companies and customers are adopting Egeria and the Egeria standard. So, you know, there's many places that it's being adopted and embedded within IBM technology. And this is sort of just one of the areas that Brendan looks after where it's being adopted. One quick thing I'm going to mention before we start. I did mention that we've got our next Egeria webinar on the 23rd of next month. After that, we are going to be doing some training webinars as well and classroom webinars to help people get up and running. When we do those webinars, we're going to be using some tooling which will allow people to come in, work as in a classroom environment, and they will be able to sort of have conversations one-to-one with some of the instructors if they're getting stuck, you know, with implementing or setting up their Egeria environment. So we'll have lots more information to come on that. So if you follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter, and you'll find Egeria, not under Egeria, but if you notice in the top left-hand side of your screen, but under ODPI. So on Twitter, we're at ODPI. And so search for the ODPI because it's the part of the foundation, the Linux Foundation that Egeria sort of falls under. So always search for Egeria ODPI. And actually, John's put that in the chat window if you wanted to quickly sort of cut and paste it. So it says ODPI or ODPI org. So I missed off the org bit. Okay, Brendan, I will let you introduce yourself and talk about Cloud Paks in Egeria. Brendan, are you? We can't hear you at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, you okay?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, sorry, I was just worried that you couldn't hear me.
You
hi,
just need to maximize your slides.
Yeah, just doing it.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Brendan Buckingham. I actually work in a customer-facing part of the IBM business, working with customers on developing their data and AI strategies, certainly around IBM products and increasingly more widely in an open environment. So what I wanted to be covering today is just how IBM are viewing metadata, quality, governance and those sorts of areas, but also perhaps how we're starting to emerge into a broader topic of how we interchange with other metadata catalogs, etc., and how we support the move into multiple clouds and the edge. So IBM have a very prescriptive model of how we view what we call a ladder to AI in terms of most of our customers are trying to modernize their architecture and infrastructure. And the first part of that is obviously collecting the data, either through traditional collection or through virtualization. But also increasingly we're finding that customers are in various states of evolution on what we call organized, which you'd understand as cataloging metadata. I mean, it's certainly true to say that this is very fragmented in a lot of the customers we deal with, and increasingly we're finding customers that have their metadata stored in spreadsheets in all sorts of organizations. But there's a growing understanding that to be able to actually deliver the outcomes that the business is demanding today and moving forward, this is very much a key focus of a lot of the conversations that we're currently having across the customer base and beyond. Obviously, then there's the next area which covers in terms of building AI models. It's not just AI, it could be dashboards, it could be prescriptive modeling, and obviously right up to AI models, NLP, and some of the more advanced stuff that Mandy was alluding to, and also building them with trust and explainability, and that's critical. And then obviously being able to productionize that. We find a lot of customers that are really struggling to get past day one with a lot of their AI or data science modeling to put it in production, and also to repeat that occasion. We're also finding that people are putting models up there and actually not refreshing or remodernizing them. So back to Mandy's presentation earlier, we're finding them they actually degrading and they're becoming unfair over time. So in terms of how we actually answer that question in IBM is essentially we build a model, and I'll build the whole slide now, called Cloud Pak for Data, which essentially is our integrated platform to help us or help customers productionize their AI. And it's a set of core services that runs on Kubernetes and Red Hat OpenShift, so it's multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. And it allows you to support the roles, as you see at the top, that go into actually productionizing the insight, or AI as we like to call it, right from collect and connect to organize and integrate in terms of discovery, search, data transformation, cataloging, etc., right through to analytics and infuse. And it's quite critical that if your data isn't clean, if your data isn't well understood, if your data doesn't have valuable metadata around it, isn't qualitative, it creates problems in terms of your ability to productionize AI or insight. And customers really understand the problems they face, but often we find are struggling to really find a solution to be able to deal with that. And also then when you stretch back into the data part, we're dealing with disparate data silos within the organization, and increasingly we're seeing a broad set of new data sources outside the organization, whether it be weather data or data from the ecosystem that organization belongs in. So in terms of data and metadata and being able to share that data, it's becoming more complicated. And when you get into technologies like distributed learning, it's going to be even more important that we understand and are able to interoperate using metadata and understanding the rules that are around that metadata to be able to implement fair models or models that are performant. So in terms of the core of Cloud Pak for Data in this environment, we're very much infusing machine learning into the way we actually build our catalog in terms of classifying, discovery, detecting sensitive data and obfuscating it, looking at data quality and also analyzing it, because certainly a lot of our customers don't have necessarily the resource to be able to go on cataloging data day in, day out. So we're using AI in a sensible way to actually help us build those models, help us build those rules, etc., and scale this within an organization. And certainly that relevance of data doubling every 2 years, but personnel not doubling every 2 years, this is a very welcome way of going about it. But I think it's also fair to say that we don't see governance as just a catalog, as the previous speaker was saying. We're looking at infusing governance obviously into the way we build models, and right through into the way that we query data. Instead of using SQL, we would like to use discovery to be able to query data based on business terms, for example, because then if you look at the right-hand side, it opens up the catalog to being used not just by data scientists and CDOs, but line of business users who really can get the value. So we're trying to democratize its use beyond just the normal data professionals and catalog professionals like quality SMEs and curators, etc., to line of business in support of data science projects. So this is a slide I pinched. I apologize if it was your slide, but the challenge we certainly face, and a lot of the discussions I'm having with customers that are starting to mature in this space, starts to become interoperability. Now, the first stage of interoperability that I'm seeing is where we work within a customer ecosystem, where, to deliver a product or a set of capabilities, they're working with a supply chain. And certainly, enforcing your metadata catalog choice on somebody is not an option. So certainly we're seeing a demand for integrating that and integrating it with a variety of different repositories on different cloud services. And that's certainly becoming a really big driver in terms of distributing a service. And I think it's an outcome for us of being hybrid cloud and being able to run on multiple clouds. A lot of our customers want to work on multiple clouds. They want to run their applications and their APIs and all of their metadata where it matters, or implement capabilities where it matters. And that often isn't within the organization, it's on the edge of the organization. And then we're also seeing the development of IoT devices and edge services driving a lot of our data and AI capabilities in terms of requirements, especially in the industrial space. But increasingly, we're seeing that conversation take place in banks and other areas where those services are gradually becoming more and more important. And within the WKC development, as you've seen from Joe, Egeria is an important factor for us in terms of being able to interoperate with other metadata standards, sometimes to migrate from older systems, but also increasingly we're seeing a move to actually federate or use it to be able to actually interoperate with other people in the ecosystem, also with other parts and other businesses that go into delivering products. So in terms of the way we're working, and that was a very brief overview We have Cloud Pak for Data that is essentially our way of delivering a productionized ladder to AI, including a lot of open source tools and third-party tools that support the process of building insight within an organization. But we also see that's critical to that part of the pie is obviously metadata, something which I'm sure you all understand. But I would say that the number of customers that I see and within the market, that's an emerging understanding about what that really means. And typically that might start with data quality, but it's gradually merging into understanding the whole concept of how they deal with data and metadata. And we're very rapidly seeing it expand out beyond the edge of organizations into their ecosystems with other bodies, into multiple cloud solutions as well, where customers are actually implementing multiple technologies. And the last use case is where customers have actually got historic capabilities they want to interact, or fragmented capabilities within their organization where they're working and implementing those solutions. Hopefully that was brief and to the point.
That was great. Thank you, Brendan. So yeah, if anyone's not come across the Cloud Paks, they're a new way that IBM Cloud is sort of, am I still talking or?
Yeah, you're talking. You
can hear me still. Sorry, I thought my computer was going a bit mad there. I lost my connectivity a couple of times. So the Cloud Paks are a new way IBM are sort of going to market, and effectively a Cloud Pak is a suite of capabilities offerings. And of course, Brendan was talking about the Cloud Pak for Data. We are looking at putting Egeria and in the other Cloud Paks, and we've been starting to discuss that with the Cloud Pak team. So, particularly things like Cloud Pak for Integration, which is things like a message broker for, SOA integration, which is now ACE, and also MQ and our API frameworks in there as well. And again, then there's other Cloud Paks for things like application security, automation, and so the list goes on. So we're looking at that Egeria framework, working with them, because they're not just sort of commercial products, they also contain a whole host of software, open source offerings as well. So Brendan, we didn't get any questions, so having a very quiet day on questions, so hopefully we'll have some at the end. And our next speaker, I'll introduce now, who is Lucha.
Hi, everyone.
You can hear me still? I wasn't sure. Everyone seemed to keep freezing in the window, so I wasn't sure if I was sort of talking to myself or what. So this is quite an interesting one, because Brendan actually also mentioned about APIs. So it's obviously a very topical thing, looking at glossaries and using with APIs as well. And I think it's something that's fascinating, because I work in another area other than data as my daytime job, and which does involve APIs and things. So I'm looking forward to hearing this presentation as well. So we'll hand over to you if you want to screen share or whatever you're doing. We'll let you kick off.
Yes, perfect. Yes, I will try to share now. Please confirm if you see it, because I also have some hiccups with.
Yeah, we can see that. You just need to maximize your screen if you're doing that.
Yes.
That's great.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Lucha Palashevsky. I'm since recently I joined Egeria team, working for Angie for some time now. Have some experience around metadata, especially around this area, APIs driven by metadata. So I will talk about today on how and what are we doing in regards of current state we are at in ING, and how we are looking into the future in this area, especially because we are in the process of adopting Egeria as our base for a new product and platform. So yes, this is the idea where we are now on this area. So we really know that APIs are widely used and in an enterprise environment like ING. So they're driving our digital transformation. We open up more. We tend to open up more, operate in a more open way. and therefore it's actually a preferred way of exchanging data between systems. We can see that quite a lot of programs really now are dealing with actually APIs. Recently, we started with, we implemented a PSD2 program. We actually opened up more APIs. Everything really happens a lot there in that area in APIs. And of course, we have on top always those regulatory requirements because we are doing a financial business, of course. And I should not really go back to the question whether we need the governance here. It's more than obvious. And since we, as ING, are driving our governance from a metadata perspective, it's really important for us to do something about this data that is exchanged between systems, in this particular case using APIs. So the story begins with the initiative. I think it was like 2 years ago when I was part of that team, Data in Motion Governance. The purpose of that team was to bring metadata, because as a piece of really key ingredient of our strategy to govern, to bring that metadata from the data management world and to the more operational area, and bring it into the global engineering platforms and tools. So that was the mission. We worked on a solution to do this. We started with actually did some analysis, and we started with thinking about the whole process, looking at it from a design perspective first, because we think design first is a good approach, especially when we do, as a company, design customer-centric APIs, enterprise APIs. So therefore, we started looking into those standards. So API design and how we could have support that was, of course, with the back then Swagger, currently known as API specification, so language to describe your APIs. And on top, because it's a simply extension of that language, of the JSON standard, JSON schema standard, sorry. And we basically took this as a base and added one key ingredient, which ING also had, and that is basically, I think, where everything comes together. And quite important, our metadata, central metadata glossary. So in ING, that is known as ING Esperanto. It is a well-taught data model to actually manage a lot of, manage a lot of metadata in a proper way, with a proper business definition from a business background, with clear and understandable, free of dialect language, defining business terms. So when we look into that, this is where we start. We actually thought of driving the whole tooling or provide help to the engineers for based on this key metadata glossary. So for us, Esperanto is just a derived version of one of the industry models for banking. Probably you all know, heard better of. And what happens is that Esperanto for us is just for this initiative was really the base to get to the schemas or JSON schemas. So we use this glossary. It's a hierarchy as well. It supports relationships between those business concepts, and we started from there. What we do, I will shortly demonstrate that. What we do, we take this as a model and generate a set of JSON schemas based on that model. What is important here, you can see in this slide, is of course, the business terms are clearly described and provide a unique way to really have the glossary drive your data definitions. We can see here that that is translated on the left side. It is the technology that we use to store the glossaries, and that is you can recognize it. It's IGC glossary catalog. So from there we get the metadata via its REST API, and we generate JSON schemas. So it is also interesting here to mention that we really have a technology that serves us well into the area of glossary management and catalog in that regard. But we struggled a bit with adding an extra layer that it is going to serve us to seamlessly actually get out more transformed or more physical model to be used in API. So we did actually it was a joint effort with the GDM team and Esperanto team who actually helped us with customizing certain aspects of the base types and terms in IGC to actually come up with a more and unlock the way to come up with a more physical representation of what we consider to be a schema from that metadata model. So to be, because I think it's better now to show it. So this is the tool I was talking about. This is a centralized platform within ING, and Open API editor is just part of the API platform. And what is this? This is just an extended version of an open source tool you are most probably all familiar with. It's an open source thing. We extended it with this Esperanto language. So the business schemas derive from Esperanto. And I will show it how it works now. This is a live demo. So on the left, the tool is the console where API designers, engineers can design their interface, their API interface. So I will just craft quickly one API definition here. I'm just for demo purposes, I'm defining one API that is to manage addresses. So one endpoint get address. It is a get, defining a resource to get the address resource. And I'm using a snippets. This tool supports snippets as well. So defining a description, I'm filling out the required parts. So this is just a starting point for every API design. We can define now the structure that is used in this case to get the data out of an API, but also depending on the method, we can do the same for posting data. So for bidirectional communication with an API, we can define the data. How the engineers used to work before is that they always define the schema here in place, like I'm doing it now, and just thinking of data design and local data. They were typing the data here and always I always struggle as engineers also to what is the best naming convention for this? What is the best type to use for such a field in one data? So you can see on the right side, I defined a simple schema, and I have I'm ready with my endpoint to actually work on this. But what we did with this tool, we actually said, as I said at the beginning, we want to really do this in a more standardized way. We want to do this more in a more consistent way. and really help the engineers to define their, not really spend time also bring the knowledge to them for meta from the global and reusable catalog, bring the knowledge to them so they can really craft more useful and consistent data structures. So how we do that? We can, instead of defining in place the data types and the data structures, we can just refer to the catalog we have of schemas, for example, and choose one structure from the list of available items we have in this context of the tool, and really have a better structure, or structure that is derived from a business glossary, global glossary, free of local dictionary of local dialect. And I can show it here. It is defined properly. So the postal address as entity. When we talk about postal addresses within business terminology, this is the best definition. It has the properties that are valid for this context, and it has all the sub-schemas. The whole structure is just reused now in this endpoint. And we have a lot of structures. They're all derived from the Esperanto model that I mentioned before. It is sort of from the conceptual model with a bit of an extra layer with the physical extra information added during modeling phase to actually keep the types of data and even more further specified. We are able to get this nice, bring the nice metadata driven schemas to the tooling. And furthermore, we added scoring mechanism. So whoever defines an API, it can also he can also see how well he did in regards to his data design, how his compliance in regards to Esperanto. And yeah, this is what we have now, with one remark that in order to have this working, this is one part of the platform. As I said, this is delivered in a more manual way. So DevOps teams have to always be involved into the middle. And we have this just as an initial implementation. Therefore, I would like to go back to the presentation, and this opens a nice opportunity, and we are now going back and rethinking the whole how the whole solution looks like. And of course, we think about the future, and we see a lot of opportunities for us to actually improve this solution we have for governing APIs via metadata. And now we are in the process of adopting Egeria, so we are productizing it. We will establish an open metadata platform based on top of Egeria. And this is really interesting and exciting because we see a lot of potential there. We want to build a lot on top of this platform. So we would first use it as a metadata integration platform, and we will standardize the metadata exchange. Currently, it is a really cumbersome and manual process to export the data from existing technology and a catalog. It's a bit locked down, and we want to unlock it and really ship the metadata in a more seamless way to the other platforms, like I've shown, but in a more automated fashion and integrated fashion. So we also want to expand and standardize on the governance side, and really look at more into different metadata areas. And because we are now mostly dealing with glossaries and data assets, but we would like to also expand on here and see what we can do with lineage actually for APIs as well. And collaboration, for example, you've seen the tool. I skipped to show you that there is also not only it's not only one directional. You can see here this indicator also shows how the schemas, the global schemas, are used within the APIs. So we would like to, we have this information retrieved from the API platform. We would like to ship that back to the metadata repositories for different purposes. We would like also to have extra collaboration in regards to the schemas themselves. So provide a ways for the actual consumers, users of the schemas to interact. So they can also score the schemas, they can collaborate in that way. So therefore we would like to expand. Also, I mentioned a lot of manual work needed to actually generate those schemas. We want to automate that, ultimately make it on the fly. So integrate what we have from a metadata side in Egeria, make it available right away to the rest of the platforms, the IT platforms. And yes, we would also like to bring more and push more metadata towards those platforms. For example, with the first implementation and solution, we don't have delivered everything that is valid still for the context of APIs. For example, classifications are not there. Data ownership and reference data, those are on our agenda, but we really believe that Egeria, as a technology, can help to really make that happen. And finally, also, I think, yeah, we are looking also into more complex use cases in this regard. One of them will be to also feedback the whole metadata from the IT platform, for example, the APIs as there. So describe them back to the Egeria or to the open metadata platform, so we can still have even more knowledge back to the whole centralized metadata store. And I think it is a really nice opportunity for us, and a lot of ideas, a lot of use cases on our backlog, and we're looking forward to actually doing this. And this is what I had in my short demo and presentation.
And that was excellent, Lucia. Thank you very much. We got quite a lot of questions for you.
Okay.
So we've also got a couple of questions, which I think Marina's on the call as well. And I'll probably aim at Marina and Pat, maybe Mandy. So the first question, oh, actually, it was the last question I'm going to send to you, Lucia, which is the API specifications are often generated automatically based on the code. Do you consider supporting this scenario as well?
Yes, indeed. We had it also on our backlog to actually extend the tooling that generates this. We stopped at the phase where we experienced some issues back then with the compatibility, but it was mainly because of some dependencies we had with the Swagger libraries back then. It was on our radar, and just it's a work that we have to finish. Of course, we would like to support also a bottom-up approach to design APIs. So if you have start from the implementation, generate Swagger APIs, and of course, then if needed further on, further design it or detailizing it. But the current state, it's not that we are having it in the tooling.
Okay, lovely. So Marina, are you there still? Or is she on mute? Or is it someone else?
I'm here.
Are you? Brilliant. Okay. So we got a few questions about IGN Esperanto. And is that open to the public? So I sort of gave a bit of an answer saying no, it's not. But I just wondered if you wanted to sort of elaborate a bit more about how you use Esperanto. And one of the other questions we got about Esperanto was, do you use it as a glossary or also as an ontology?
Yes, so ING Esperanto that Lubci mentioned in his lightning talk.
Yes.
Basically, yes, it's not open to the public. It is basically an ontology, indeed. It's not just a collection of the business terms. It's basically how do we describe our, our world using the business terminology. And it is our common language because ING is in different countries and we have different local languages. But when we need, for example, to do reporting or to look at the statistics and the numbers, we are using a common language to make sure that data that is described in this common language is used for calculations, for reporting and things like this. Yeah.
Okay, great. And the Esperanto that you have, that's actually based on the IBM industry model.
As far as I know.
Yes.
I know Pat spends a lot of time with the team and working on the model that you have. So, but yeah, the other questions that we had quite a lot of questions because, of course, the IBM industry model is an asset that IBM sell. But with Egeria, one of the other things we've done is with there is an open source model that can be used to create glossaries called SIM, and I put a link to it in the Q&A panel. And the SIM model is considerably smaller, so it's got about sorry, actually I typed in incorrectly. So the IBM glossary for banking has got over 7,000 terms in it, glossary terms, not 700, 7,000. And if you, and of course there are industry models for things like travel and transport, and you know, that's got sort of, you know, again, I think over 5,000 glossary terms for that. So if you look at SIM was launched earlier this year by Salesforce and others, and that is open source, so it's free to download. There is a Jupyter workbook that shows how to import that into Egeria, and that model has it's just under 1,000 glossary terms that you can import and use as a sort of almost a starter glossary for yourself. But again, that is not specific to any industry, it's just across all industries, and more of a sort of starting point for you. I'm not sure if anyone else has got any comments they want to make on glossaries. No? Okay, well the next thing I was going to do is I think we've covered all our different lightning talks that we had, all very interesting and good, and we also got the results of our poll. I don't know if everyone noticed them sort of pop up in front of you, and it was really great to get that feedback and see you know, what's topical and what people want to see, because as an open source team we have to sort of think of what might people be interested in, what's topical for us, and hope that that's topical for other people. So it was great to get the feedback, and it looks like, you know, the most popular option that we had was building a data catalog, you know, techniques for loading metadata. So it's kind of the basics. So how do we start building that catalog and start utilizing it and get our metadata in there? So as a team, we'll sort of work out what's best to sort of show, and maybe that next session will be sort of focused around that and on different topics. So if we have any more questions, now's the time to type them into the window. We've got the speakers that we've had for the past few days on the call as well. So we've got Chris, who's from SAS. We have John from the Linux Foundation. We've got Mandy, who's talked today and the other days as well, from IBM as one of our distinguished engineers. And of course, we've got the guys from ING. Unfortunately, we've not got Fer today, but we've got Dimi, who's talking and demoing Lineage, and Marina as well. So if anyone has got a question, I should have some background music to play, because typing questions might not be the quickest thing. You can type them in there and ask away. So Mandy, actually, well, if there are any questions that might be coming, do you want to sort of, because it's yourself that's been sort of thinking about these classroom sessions that we might run, that will show how Egeria works. So you've seen how this stuff works. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on what that might be like?
Not too much, because I've only seen a very small demo, but it basically, whereas with WebEx we can all listen and interact with the chat, the classroom allows individual attention to somebody who's maybe struggling with something. So that would mean that we could all be working on our own laptops, but it would be possible to get one-to-one attention while we're running the session.
Okay, and are we thinking, so we have a number of Jupyter notebooks and we have a Docker image. So if someone has Docker on their laptop, Nigel Jones, who's one of the maintainers, wrote a blog which is on the ODPI blog site under Egeria, which talks through how to download, you know, Docker, get that up and running, and then get Egeria running in Docker, you know, the command that you sort of type in to kick it all off. And then so that someone can actually run those Jupyter notebooks. Is this what you would like to cover, or are there other things you'd like to cover?
Well, probably, I mean, we have a whole series of notebooks. So I think the startup of the environment is important, and we can do the Docker version or the Kubernetes version. And then we have different notebooks for different personas. So it might be if you're interested in the administration. So this is sort of how to configure the servers and sort of start, stop them, query how they're working, that sort of thing. Or we could do one that was much more focused on, you know, I'm a governance lead, or I own a whole load of data and I want to create a catalogue of it. We could do those as well.
Okay, so hopefully we'll be running monthly events, and we'll have some of those available, and all the sessions that we've recorded will be on our YouTube channel, and as I believe there'll be an email going out to sort of elaborate on that, how to get to that YouTube channel, so you can watch all these back again. We just have one more question. It will be very interesting to see a hands-on video, how to take the first steps getting familiar with Egeria. So absolutely, and I think that's what we'll cover in the training session when we get around to running that. I've got to say, if you read Nigel's blog, which is on the ODPI blog page, so if you go and find
I've just put a link.
Have you put a link to it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So if anyone wants to grab that quickly, that is an exceptionally easy blog to follow, and I would recommend going through it. It's not overly technical. You can cut and paste all the commands straight onto your command line to sort of get Docker running and things like this. It also tells you how to refresh the environment. And again, if you have any issues, you know, you're more than welcome to join the Egeria Slack channel. And there's a sort of general tab in there where you can go and ask questions, and normally we're fairly good at answering them because there's quite a few people in the community now. We've got one other question. Does Egeria also produce the legal documents reports we've seen in the previous slide?
The legal documents. Are we talking about licensing? Or?
I'm not sure what you mean by legal documents and reports. I'm not sure. That's probably a good one to put in our Slack channel. I don't know if anyone's got a link to the Slack channel they could quickly put into the chat window. That would be quite nice. But you can find the Slack channel from the GitHub pages and from the Egeria page as well. So, but again, if you can find the community ODPI.org, and that's on Twitter. So you can follow us on Twitter, and you can also find the contributors and maintainers probably on Twitter as well. And again, we're on Slack. Okay, I think we've covered everything there. It's been a fabulous 3 days. We've all really enjoyed this. If you've got any feedback, it would be great to sort of hear from people. And we hope to be running more monthly sessions and maybe another 3-day event sometime later in the year. Mandy, have you any closing words before we hand over to John?
Just really thank you everybody for turning up for 3 days, and also for giving us such great questions and feedback, and please keep the dialogue going.
Yeah, and thank you very much to all the speakers who've presented over the past 3 days. And their presentations, of course, will be available on YouTube. John, we'll hand back to you now so you can close our event.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you. I guess keep echoing this. Thank you for all of the speakers who put tons of energy into these talks. Thank you all as attendees who have spent all or part of the past 3 days with all of us. This has been a really great crowd. I think we've been all very pleased about this. As Moya mentioned, we're looking to keep this going on a monthly basis. So look for details of our next webinar, which is planned for 4 weeks from today. We'll be sending out either, it'll be on our website, social, all of that. We'll also be sending follow-up emails to all of you as well. And I think we also might try to stick a little bit of a survey there just for some feedback on the session as that. So keep an eye out for that follow-up email. With all of that, thank you all so very much. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy. And we'll all talk hopefully again here soon. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.